Hello viewers, The Wasteland is a landmark poem in English literature. It is known as the modern epic. And naturally, questions on and about the wasteland are quite regularly asked in different competitive exams at the university level as well as at the UGC net level. Let us get to know quite a few things related to the wasteland. As far as the authorship is concerned, it was written by the poet Thomas Sterns Eliot, better known as T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot, we know him as a poet, but he was, apart from being a poet, he was a playwright, a critic, an editor, and so on. It was he who revived the poetic drama. Poetic drama was there in the Elizabethan period. Later, it fell into disuse. But T.S. Eliot revived the poetic drama in the 20th century. Likewise, as a critic also, he has done wonderful work. It was he who brought back into the limelight the poets known as the metaphysicals. John Donne and his followers were very popular during their own day. In the later times, they were almost forgotten, but T.S. Eliot wrote an essay called The Metaphysical Poets and brought them back into limelight. In this particular essay, he also made use of a phrase called dissociation of sensibility. And while commenting on Hamlet in a celebrated essay called Hamlet and His Problems, he made use of a phrase called objective correlative. The poem was published in 1922. Remember, 1922 is a very important year so far as English literature is concerned, because it was in this particular year that The Wasteland was published. It was in the same year that Jacob's Room by Virginia Woolf was also published. And it's a mere coincidence that Ulysses by James Joyce was also published in the same year. All these three were landmarks because they departed from the established norm of writing poetry or fiction. This particular kind of writing, where the poet or the writer deviates from the established path and makes his own path, is known as avant-garde. The poem The Wasteland has 5 parts in it, 5 fragments or components that come together to form the poem The Wasteland. They are, namely, the burial of the dead. This is the name of the first fragment. The second fragment is known as the game of chess. The third fragment is fire sermon. Fourth one is known as death by water. And the fifth one is known as what the thunder said. So the order of these fragments is also very important. It has been used on several occasions in different competitive exams. We have to remember not just the names of these different fragments but the order as well. Coming to the structure of the poem, when T.S. Eliot wrote The Waste Land, he wrote the poem in 800 lines and he circulated the copies among his friends, colleagues, and other lovers of literature. But they were all shocked because T.S. Eliot had markedly deviated from the established path of writing poetry. He had used expressions, words, and sentences from popular works written in so many different languages of the world, like Latin, Sanskrit, French, and so on. So, naturally, people were shocked to find a poem which was quite different from other poems. T.S. Eliot came to their rescue by supplying them notes about the poem. But even then, most of his friends and colleagues were unconvinced. They were not satisfied by the arguments forwarded by T.S. Eliot regarding the poem. But the poem The Waste Land, as we see it today, has only 433 lines. You may wonder how a poem which was written in 800 lines got shorter and ended up with only 433 lines. A poet, a fellow poet of T.S. Eliot, called Ezra Pound, blue penciled the original text, which was in 800 lines, and cut it short to 433 lines. So the poem The Waste Land, as we see it today, has only 433 lines. One more important thing that should be remembered is that the poem The Waste Land is dedicated to Ezra Pound. As far as the theme of the poem The Waste Land is concerned, it is death in life. According to the poet T.S. Eliot himself, the theme of the poem The Waste Land is death in life. And as we already know, the poem comprises 5 parts: the burial of the dead, the game of chess, fire sermon, death by water, and what the thunder said. And if you have a casual reading of this particular poem, the 5 fragments appear to not to have anything in common among them. But there is one string, there is one thing that links all these 5 components together, and that is the presence of a double-sexed blind prophet called Tiresias. Tiresias is taken from Greek mythology. In Greek mythology, Tiresias is a double-sexed saint who is blind. And another important thing about The Waste Land is that T.S. Eliot alludes to many works in different languages. It's a cosmopolitan poem. The thing is, you can't say that The Waste Land is an English poem, though most of the part it is in English, but still we find fragments, we find sentences, phrases from Greek, Latin, Sanskrit, almost like world languages here and there. And this one is a very famous allusion that is from a Shakespearean play. Those were pearls that were his eyes. This particular phrase is taken from Ariel's song in The Tempest. The Tempest is one of the comedies that has been written by T.S. Eliot. There we find a character called Ariel. Ariel cannot be seen, only his presence can be understood by his sounds. And here, in one of his songs, he gives these words. Those were pearls that were his eyes. And T.S. Eliot has taken this particular string from the Song of Ariel in The Tempest. Not only Tempest, he has made allusions to so many different works of art written in not just English but in different world languages. And the poem The Wasteland concludes with these words: Datta, Dayadvam, Damyata, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. These words, Datta, Dayadhyam, Damyata, Shanti, 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 are the concluding lines of the poem The Wasteland. Remember, if you write competitive exams on English literature, you are sure to be asked questions like this. What are the concluding lines of the poem The Wasteland? And you have to choose these words, Datta, Dayadvam, Damyata, Shanti, 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 as the answer to the question, the concluding words of The Wasteland. These words, Datta, Dayadvam, Damyata, Shanti, 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 are taken from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Upanishads are Sanskrit texts which date back to a very long time in the past. They are very famous. They are known as the minds of all knowledge. And T.S. Eliot has opted to conclude his poem with words taken from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad saying Datya Dayadvam Damyata Shanti Shanti Shanti. Here, like I just now said, the concluding lines of the poem are from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. There are several Upanishads, and one of them happens to be the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, and the concluding lines of the poem Wasteland are taken from this particular Upanishad called the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. The last word, Shanti. Shanti in simple terms, Shanti is nothing but peace in Sanskrit. But for T.S. Eliot, it had an entirely different meaning. He defined Shanti as peace that passeth understanding. Peace that passeth understanding is peace that is out of anybody's understanding, that we cannot understand. So, this particular poem is considered to be a modern epic, though it is quite difficult to understand. We have to view it from the point of view of a cosmopolitan narrator, a narrator like Tiresias, who is blind but still with his mind's eye who can see almost everything. And T.S. Eliot goes on to say that when he is asked to define what this particular poem is all about, he describes it as a heap of broken images. For T.S. Eliot, the poem The Wasteland was a heap of broken images, and in another situation he defines the poem as whatever Tiresias sees is the poem.